Well, welcome everybody. I'm Casey Droege. I'm gonna just give you a quick intro to Zoom before we jump into the talk itself. If you are on a computer, at the top of your screen, you should have something that says View Options, and that is something you can click on and then choose side by side. And when you choose side by side, you should get a little sort of bar that you can move around. And it's a great way to make sure that the artist's slides are not going to be interrupted by people's faces. You can also toggle between speaker view and gallery view, and that'll give you a chance to either focus on whoever's talking or check out the whole community. And as Cor mentioned earlier, please do remember that this is a community space. So if your camera's on or if you're using the chat, just be respectful of everyone who's here. I think we're good to go, so we'll jump in. I am Casey Droege, as I said before. I am the co-director for PGH Photo Fair, which is a program under my business, Casey Droege Cultural Productions, along with Small Mall, which is our concept store. So we decided to pair up because we're not able to actually offer PGH Photo Fair this year. Normally we do one weekend a year where we bring in internationally known gallerists, dealers, photo projects to show their work at the Carnegie Museum of Art. But that's just not going to happen right now. So instead, we've decided to pivot, and we're offering our normal speaker series, which is talks online from collectors, from curators, sort of behind the scenes folks. But in addition to that, we decided this year to pair up with Small Mall and do these artist-focused talks. So we're choosing Pittsburgh photographers, we're asking them to talk about their work in depth, and it's a great opportunity for us to kind of focus on what's happening locally. So tonight we are really thrilled to have Sue Abramson, who is someone we've gotten to work with in the past. She's presented at our 6x8 series. She is in our Small Mall shop. She is a wonderful human, so we're happy to have her. You probably know her as a Pittsburgh-based photographer. She works with lots of different methods to produce imagery that's relating to the environmental landscape. She's shown nationally, internationally, and is in several collections. A few of them I'm going to mention: the Carnegie Museum of Art, the Polaroid collection, or Polaroid Corporation's collection, Blue Cross of Western Pennsylvania, and the Venture Foundation collection. So we're very happy to have Sue here tonight. Sue, do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Okay. Welcome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And I will, so just so everybody's comfortable, we're gonna have Sue talk about her work, and at the end, we'll open it up to questions. But at any point, if you have a question, throw it into the chat. We can address it later. Once Sue is done presenting, you'll actually be able to unmute yourselves and ask questions live, which is a nice way to just come face to face with everybody. So I'll remind you at the end of Sue's presentation. So Sue, if you're ready, you can start sharing your screen.
I'll share my screen.
All right.
Okay, got it. So I'm going to start. I want to thank you, Casey and Cor, for inviting me, and I'm really honored to be here and part of this series. I'm going to talk about several projects that I've been working on over the past year. Many of them are long-term projects, and I'll focus mainly on the recent work in those projects. The first project I'm going to talk about is probably the most challenging thing I've ever worked on, and it is part of an artist residency that I was awarded with the choreographer Mita Ghoshal for the Freshworks residency at Kelly Strayhorn Theater. And it's an opportunity for a choreographer to collaborate with an artist outside their medium. And the idea is to put together a 30-minute performance, and it's to new work and to experiment and to play. And so I was excited when Mita invited me to apply with her because at first I was actually sort of nervous about it because live performance is not really something that I'm familiar with. But Mita and I have shared a lot of losses in our lives. We have a lot of shared experiences, and we both use our art practice to work through our grief. And so it made sense for us to work together. And we decided that, of course, she would dance and I would do the sets, and then we would both do some certain amount of storytelling. And what interested me about it also was that I have for a while been wanting to do sculptural objects with my black and white elephant ear leaves, which are up on the screen right now. And I also have this fantasy of doing live stories on the moth stage. So I did a little bit of something similar with the 6x8. I actually tried to do a moth talk right before the pandemic, but I didn't get picked. And so I'll do this for this project. But of course the pandemic hit, and so we can't do the live performance. And so we decided to do it virtually, and we both videotaped our parts of this performance. And so the sad news is that I won't actually get to be on stage with Mita and while she's dancing, because she's incredible. So that's, you know, the bad news. But what came out of it, though, was that I actually got to collaborate with another artist, with Megan Kolick, to do video for this production. And so, so I cleaned up my garden, made sure it was gorgeous, actually made a new patio, just touched everything up and made these sculptures and put them in my garden in preparation for the video. And then the sets could move across the street. Mita actually lives across the street from me. The sets could move across the street to Mita's backyard, and she was able to dance and use the backdrops of my photographs in her pieces as well. So, and then the video goes together with, it weaves both of our stories, you know, first me, then Mita, and they're really about living with loss and about the grief work, and also about the resilience. And so back to this, so like I said, I built these pieces, and then Meg and I collaborated. I gave her information about what I wanted, and she came over to shoot. And you know, of course, we were waiting for a really a beautiful day, a beautiful cloudy day, which never really happened in Pittsburgh this summer. And but what we didn't really anticipate was that how windy it would be. And so when we were shooting, these sculptures they're just black and white prints that have been mounted back to back and then taped together. And so they're very lightweight, and the wind just knocked them down constantly. So so we just had to keep stopping, and I would put them back together again, then she would shoot, and then they would, but what ended up happening, which was really cool, was that Meg continued to shoot while I was fixing the sculptures in the yard, and it actually became part of the piece. And so even though, I mean, the pieces are my stories of grief and grief work, in between and while I'm talking, you see me building and rebuilding. And so it's a combination of, it's another collaboration, and it also is playful. It's me as an artist working, and more resilience. And then it also sort of tapped into the way I normally work, where I am open to chance, and I, you know, work with a process or an idea, and I wait to see, you know, what happens, how it develops, and then I respond to it. And Meg and I both work that same way. So, so that was actually really very cool. And I just wanted to say at this point that, you know, just to give you a little bit of my background and why this work is so important to me, and why I pretty much have been working in this with grief in mind for a long time, because I have had significant losses in my life. My older brother died when he was 23 and I was 17. And then in 2006, my husband died. And both those deaths were very sudden, unexpected, really made a major shift in my life. So I have been living with grief my entire life, or entire adult life anyway. And my work, all of my artwork for the most part, up until very recently, has been very personal. It's been a personal response to my life. And so I tell these stories of grief work, which I've mentioned before. There's the William Worden, a psychologist, has the 4 tasks of grief, and grief is not a passive experience; it's something you actually work through. And there's acceptance, and then there is feeling the loss, adapting to your new life, and then figuring out a way to stay connected to the person you've lost. And so the body of work that all of those leaves came from is called From the Same Bulb. And they're all of an elephant ear plant, the bulbs that my husband Kevin and I planted in our garden. And the leaves were just gorgeous and huge. And being a photographer and somewhat experimental, I decided to pick a leaf one summer and print through it. So I took it in the darkroom and used it as a negative. And this is what I got. And so every year, I decided I would do this as a project, and they're just different every single year. And I also used this project to stay connected to Kevin, because we were very involved in the house and the garden together. And so when I do this project and when I work in the yard and the house, it's my way of staying connected to him. And over the years, I started scanning the leaves instead of just doing black and white. Sometimes they would be dried leaves. Then I started digging up the bulbs and scanning the bulbs. It's kind of funny at first when I put all this dirt on my scanner, I was like, oh, I know this is a mistake. I'm ruining my scanner. But you can get the glass replaced on those things. So I decided to just take a risk and do it. And then I pull the bulbs at different times of year. Sometimes they would be, while the leaves were still green, sometimes the leaves were dead. And then just to go back a little more in the history of this project, in 2011, I was invited to be part of the Gestures show at the Mattress Factory. And so I chose the hearth in the apartment in Monterey Street and did this kind of Abramson family crest. So I try to do a tapestry of elephant ear leaves. And then, at the end of the season, I actually roll up my elephant ear leaves and put them in Ziploc bags and freeze them. And so I can defrost them and use them later. And so I happened to have a stash in my freezer, and I defrosted them to make this tablecloth this is the set for the last segment of the piece that I'm doing with Mita. And the name of the piece, I don't know if I told you, was called Of Lungs and Leaves. So this is coming up in a few weeks. I'm still working on it now, but this is the main project that's really consuming my time. And it was great because the residency was supposed to be in April and the performance in May. And instead we made the residency the month of July. So we actually had deadlines and limits and structure. And that really helped me and to actually concentrate during this time. Another project that I have started working on and thinking about a little bit is a continuation of a woodlands project, which is a series of photographs that I've actually been working on for 40 years. And I don't do it every year or all the time. I go back and forth, and I walk in the woods all the time, but I'm not always shooting in the woods. And what has been interesting and noticeable to me in recent years is the amount of downed trees. And of course, because of climate change and because of all the severe storms, there's just so many more trees that are down in the woods and all over, and it's really violent and it's very disturbing, beautiful at the same time. And so I'm sort of doing some sketches with my iPhone and getting ready to go back into the woods in the winter time to shoot more of this. And for this project, I shoot on film and then scan and make digital prints. But the phone is really great for sketches, and also, I've actually printed some things from the phone as well. It's a great camera. But I need it to be wintertime because I don't want there to be any leaves on the trees, so that you can really see the roots and the base of the tree. It's just astounding how much is underneath, or how widespread the roots are for the trees. And so this is what I was looking at in March, mainly before the leaves started to come out. And then the project, the Woodlands Journal, I made it into a book 2 years ago. And this is the book, and it does go through sort of at the same time frame, the work that I shot all these woodlands photographs. And the project started when I lived in Emmitsburg, Maryland, where I met my husband. He built a geodesic dome on the side of the mountain in Emmitsburg, and I moved in with him after college, and we lived right in the middle of the woods. And like I said, most of my work comes from personal experience and from what I know, and so I just started shooting in the woods. And this was a greeting card. I used to do Valentine's cards, and then I stopped. And then we did this greeting card, and somehow or another we had 2 pairs of lederhosen, and we had matching bow saws, of course, because we cut our own wood for the wood stove, and flannel shirts. So we did, and this I set up with a self-timer on the camera, and this is the start of the woodlands. And this is an early photograph from that series, so it's pretty much behind where I lived on the mountain. And at that point, I was so interested in the chiaroscuro, the dark and light of the light in the woods, because it's just, the film exposes it and sees it much differently than your eye. The shadows become a lot darker. It's a lot more expressive. And so this was what I initially was looking for when I was out shooting in the woods. Oops. And this is an early picture from Emmitsburg, and I actually love this one better as a negative than as a positive. And I never did anything with it because technically it just didn't look as good. But when I was putting the book together and I was scanning everything, I realized that I could invert and turn some of those negatives into interesting images. So I included negative imagery in the book as well. When I moved up to Pittsburgh, I photographed with a friend, and we would go to regional state parks. And what I was always looking for at that point was line and trying to create some sort of order out of the chaos. And so I was never really looking for any particular plant. I was mainly looking at light and line. And then I was asked to be part of a show, Art in the Parks. And so I decided to photograph all 4 seasons. And by that point, I was more interested in depth of field and playing with more pictorial elements and more camera elements. So I was playing again with depth of field. I was trying to flatten the space. And then from there, I went into photographing after Kevin died, where everything got really dark again. And I had a physical reaction after he died. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was choking. And so I really gravitated towards all the vines and all of the vines that were choking the plants in the woods. So that's this era here. And then the last group that's in the book was part of a show that I did at the Hunt Botanical Library, where I was invited to be part of a bird's nest show. And my work was the work that segued between other artists. And so when I went into the woods to shoot for that show, I was thinking more about nests and habitats. And so this is the work that came out of that. So I pretty much stopped shooting after this, although I have started shooting the downed trees. And so that is just, I'm starting to pick up on that. But like I said, I come and go with this project, even though I'm always in the woods. The next project is kind of interesting. It comes from a couple things. And one is that I did the Master Gardener program at Phipps last year, graduated at the end of February, and we had to do a final project. And last year was the year of the cicada, and I had seen the cicadas, the periodical cicadas. These are not just the ones that are out now, but the ones that actually are underground for 17 years. And then they all come up, they're living underground, living off the roots of the trees. And then they all come up at once, and they make a lot of noise. And it's like, it's like a 50s bug horror movie. And I saw it like 20 years ago. I was up north, and I was just kind of spacing out, and I looked up in this tree, and it was moving, and I was excited and horrified at the same time, and I really wanted to photograph it, but I didn't have a smartphone at the time, and I didn't have my camera on me, so I had to wait 17 years to do it again. And then this project came up, and the cicadas were in Allegheny County, so I took advantage of it. And it was, so I did my research, and what I discovered was, well, one, that when the ground is around 65 degrees, they all come up. And the emergence is probably the most exciting thing for me, but I never actually really saw it. You have to be in the right place at the right time. Nobody knows exactly where they're coming out. But this guy is a he's in his exoskeleton. So they basically grow and break out of their exoskeletons 4 times underground, and then they come out with the 5th, and then they pop out. And here's a guy who has popped out. And it's so great looking. I know that some people get creeped out from the bugs, but I just think they're fantastic. And this is the exoskeleton without the cicada. And then over here is one that is maturing and starting to unfurl a little bit. And this was one of the better photographs I think I took from that series, because it just looks so much like an alien. And even though I've been photographing in nature for years, I'm not like a wildlife photographer. I don't really have the right camera. I don't really, I just kind of fumbled in. And so just like I was worried that I was going to miss the great emergence, which I pretty much did, I also wasn't really sure I knew what I was doing with my camera. But I went out all the time shooting. And what I'm proudest of is that I actually got them mating. And that's really all they're here for. They all come up, the millions of them, millions of them come up at once, and then they all climb up the trees. They get out of their exoskeleton, they climb up the trees. The men start singing and calling to the women, and then they have sex, and then they all get eaten eventually, and then the women lay their eggs, and the eggs then drop back into the ground, and then they start they grow for 17 years. They just do this over and over again. So just the whole notion of them is just so funny to me. And then people have a really good time with it. Like, they come up in Beaver County, and so there's a bakery there that makes cicada cookies. So the cookie on the right was last year's version, but the cookie on the left was from 17 years ago. And this guy bought it and froze it and then brought it back to the bakery. So, I mean, so you have this, many different generations of cicada cooking. Pretty funny. And so I did my project and I presented, and at first I wanted to do it like a horror movie. And I thought, no, I can't do that anymore, because we have to respect the insects. I mean, one of the reasons why I like this project is because it's about insects, and it's about the environment, and how we just have to be so much more respectful, and everything is connected, and we have to take care of all of the bugs now and all the insects. And so I didn't do the horror movie picture, but I did decide I wanted to do my own personal project. And I thought, well, I have all these cameras that have been sitting around for the equivalent of 17 years. And so I'm just going to pull out every single camera that I have that is a film camera, and I'm just going to shoot with it and see what happens. So this is a pinhole camera that I bought, never used once. It's such a beauty. I ended up not using it for this project, but I did shoot with it. Here's my 8x10 view camera that I pulled out. I never went very far with this camera, but I did take some pictures with it. And I had made so many mistakes with these cameras, especially the ones I had never used before. Did I? Oh, okay. And what ended up happening was I would get to where they were, and they were all in the trees. So I could hear them, but I couldn't really see the cicadas, but I could see their exoskeletons. And the majority of them were just in a ring around the trunk of a tree. And then there were some still stuck to the tree. And I thought, well, maybe I could just stick them to the tree, and I could make my own picture and photograph it. And I thought I was not gonna really do that. So I just collected the exoskeletons and worked with them at home. So one variation on this project was that I would work with my flawed negatives. So there's a light leak on the top left with my 8x10 view camera here. But instead of seeing that as a mistake or a problem, I thought, well, this is actually a canvas. It's a blank spot, so I can draw the cicada exoskeletons on, because I was taking botanical illustration classes at Phipps at the same time. So I decided that I would draw some on. And then, because I had collected all these exoskeletons, I thought I could use them as photogram objects, just like I would lay the leaves on the paper. I could take these pictures. I took pictures of trees, even though I couldn't see the cicadas. I could just hear them. So I did my tree pictures, and then in the darkroom, I laid the exoskeletons down to try to make a combination. But this wasn't working for me either. And then finally, in the middle of the night, one of those nights when you can't really sleep, it occurred to me how I could actually do it. And I would make an exposure of the tree, and then I would take the negative out and take the paper out of the easel, and then put the exoskeletons on the photo paper in the ring, in the circle, just like the circle around the trunk that you see, and then make a second exposure. And then in some areas where there isn't interesting texture, where they were just clear, then I drew in the modeling of the cicada, the exoskeleton. So here's where I drew on. And so some of them you can see the tree trunk better than others. And then I played around with different colors. I'm not sure that I will stick with the brown, but this is a detail of what it looked like. I feel like the gray, the gray is more abstract and maybe more palatable. So this is what I worked on when we first had lockdown, because I had done some printing, and I had the prints, and I print on a matte surface paper, so the pencil is beautiful. And actually, if you move it back and forth, it looks a little like a daguerreotype, turns positive and negative. This you can see sort of like it almost looks like the silver metallic on the paper. But I had a stack of prints, and I just couldn't sit myself down to draw. And then, of course, I couldn't go anywhere, so I sat down and started to draw. So I spent probably the majority of March and April drawing. And this one took at least 20, 30 hours to draw, because there's so many cicadas on here. So this is a process. And then I stopped doing that. Once I could get outside and garden and got a little twitchier, I couldn't sit down, but I intend to sit back down and do more of these once the weather gets colder. So this is on tap for a winter project, another winter project. And when I was walking recently, I noticed that someone had cut down a tree, and I thought, oh, that's the shape of that I create with my cicada photograms. So it really is very much the shape of the circle of exoskeletons around the trunk of the tree. And that's where, and the cicadas live around the trunk of the tree under the ground while they are growing. So it all is related to the tree, and then related to my downed trees in the park. All right, we're moving on to the next. I've got two more little projects here. This is work that I did before, it was completed actually before the pandemic. And in fact, this body of work, which I called Awake in Blue, is a year ago, I was in a show at the Irma Freeman Center with this work. And it feels like it was another lifetime ago. It feels like a different person made the work almost, because so much has changed since the pandemic. And but I love the cyanotype project. The color of the blue I find to be one of the most appealing colors. It's calming, it's inspiring. It just makes me actually feel good. And the process is kind of difficult to control, but with digital negatives, it's a lot easier. And so I just started out the project by making pictures that I took, landscapes I took while I was traveling. And so and that's how I perfected the process, was doing these really gorgeous landscapes. And, I mean, the landscapes themselves are beautiful. And then for me to interpret them in another beautiful way made a lot of sense. I feel like they were sort of a little bit of a love letter to the environment and to the landscape. But then I thought, I need to have a better concept for this project. It can't just be because it's pretty, even though they are. And I started thinking about it. And as it turned out, the later pictures, almost all of them, I took while I was on hikes or adventures or trips with my son, Alex. And we both would take our camera to these places and photograph, and then either spend the night or go home or whatever. And then I thought, well, maybe I could make it more of a family album. And when Alex was younger, we would go camping. We spent a lot of vacations on water. And so I started looking through my old negatives, and this is a negative from the Adirondacks that I took around 1998. And so I decided to pair the work with the contemporary photographs that I took with Alex, and then the more historical family photos. And this was the exhibit that I had there, and it was a wall of family photos, even though it's really my family in the landscape and the landscape. But my mother and my grandmother have these family photo walls in their homes, and so this was sort of homage to them. And this is the earliest picture. And Kevin's in these pictures. I mean, he took this picture, he's in them, but I really feel like because half of the pictures are contemporary, it's more about a mother-son relationship. And what is also interesting to me in this is that in the beginning, Alex, I mean, he's my son in all of it, but in the first half, he's a little kid. And in the second half, he's an adult. And so I just love that whole looking back on our relationship. And now we're two adults, even though we're still mother and son. And it started really when we went to Ireland in 2016, and we both really wanted to go to Ireland. We both wanted to take pictures, and this work is from Ireland. And this is the work that I have at Small Mall right now. And like I said, I feel like I made it a lifetime ago, but it still really resonates with me. And this is the Atlantic Ocean. So this is the last one. And then the very last project that I have to talk about is very different than all the others. I was at an estate sale a while ago, and I found the speculum. It was an obstetrician's house, and they actually laid out 20 speculum on a table. And every woman who walked by, you could feel they were just uncomfortable looking at these medical instruments. And for whatever reason, I decided I needed to own them. So I bought them not having any idea what I was going to do with them. And I started to do photograms with them to try to get them as far away from the original intent as possible. So I made these photograms, which were very beautiful. And then I pretty much stopped doing that. And because actually, now that I think of it, this was the work I did not long before Kevin died. And then after he died, I looked at this work and thought that I was no longer that person who made the work, because my life had changed so dramatically. But then I decided that I could make a font out of them. And so I started moving them all around and laying them on my scanner and turning them into letters. I only have about 6 more letters to do. And I decided to create this business name called F-Stop G-Spot. And I've been working on this alphabet. And what I'm doing with it is I'm actually spelling out words. Haven't done many yet, but the word that seems to be most appropriate right now is boat. And so then I have Commonwealth Press makes stickers and T-shirts and tote bags and sells them. And I have these tote bags now at Small Mall, and all the money that I get from that I give to women's reproductive health centers. So I'm furious that this is still an issue, that women's health, and especially reproductive health, is something that we always have to fight for. And so I'm trying my best to do whatever I can to give organizations some help. So the talk ends here. And but what I wanted to say that I didn't say earlier when I was talking about all the early work that I have done that deals with grieving and loss is that today's September 11th, so it is another reminder of all the tragic loss of life that we have all experienced in this country, and then with the pandemic, all the loss with the life with COVID-19, and then just the loss with our sort of normal way of life. Even the fact that we are doing this talk this way as opposed to being in person. So there's just, grief doesn't have to be about death, a person's death. It really is about any kind of loss. And so it's just, I think, important for us to talk about it, to be open to listening to other people and to feel the loss, because it just helps you to heal. And I do think that there is a taboo around talking around death. I talk about it a lot, and I notice, it's not always a popular conversation. So I want to just try and open that up a little bit more too, because it's with us all the time. So I think I'll end there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Sue.
Okay.
All right. So at this time, we're going to open it up to questions. If you want to ask Sue about a specific project, about how she got started, where she's going, anything, this is a great time to do that. You're welcome to type your questions into the chat, And I noticed, Sue, we did get one question that I will make sure to ask you, but you're also welcome to unmute yourself now. So at the bottom of your screen, you should have a microphone icon that says mute. If you click on that, you can unmute yourself and ask a question directly to Sue. Does anyone want to jump in? I see John Carson waving. Cor, are we able to unmute?
I've unmuted. I think it's a terrific body of work, and I love the kind of variety in the projects. It's interesting to see some strains that run through, and there's something about the skeletal that's in the leaves, and it's in the cicadas, and there's also something sculptural that's going on in the photography that maybe even could be pulled out more, you know, because when I looked at the works in the garden, the backdrop was really fantastic, you know, the grid of the skeletal leaves, but when they appeared as rectangles in the garden, it didn't quite work for me, you know, because they have a shape and they have a sort of skeletal form, and they have a sculptural form, and it's in lots of your work. And it'd be interesting to see if the work could come out of the rectangle here from time to time.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I have taken other shapes, existing shapes like globes and pears and bowling pins, and wrapped them with photographs. So I've sort of put a photographic texture on top of an existing shape. But yeah, this is my first time, and I'm just kind of playing with it. So, and in my mind, I had this idea of mounting these prints back to back and somehow making them stiff and being able to create building blocks with them. So I had to get that out of my system, but it would be interesting to continue playing with it. Yeah.
It kind of happened with the tablecloth.
Yeah.
Suddenly we had a photograph really turn into a three-dimensional form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, I love the work a lot, you know, and enjoyed it, but also see more possibilities there, you know, certainly in terms of the sculptural dimension.
Right. Well, you know, I still have a lot of time left in me to make work and to play. Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks.
Definitely. Does anyone else want to jump in with a question?
Hi. Yeah, I just typed this in the chat, but I'd love to just say it out loud. How did the creation of all this work help you process your loss and your grief?
Well, for one, while I'm working and creating, it helps me. Making the work and creating gets me off the couch, gets me out of my own head, and makes me participate in life. And then every time I make stuff, like the very first time after my husband died, that I cut the leaves and went into the darkroom and printed, I actually felt great. And I felt like I was living my life again, instead of, you know, being in the past and worrying and being sad. And then, like I said, because we worked in the garden together, I could think of him. You know, maybe I would cry sometimes, and that was good too. But just being able to process grief is to figure out how to adapt to your new life without whomever you've lost. So just being able to make work made me function, and then from that I would maybe change something around in the house. Like you know, one room was always one way, but now I thought, oh no, I need to make this my studio now. This is really about me. And so then I would change something so that it suit me instead of suiting Sue and Kevin. So it's really more about participating in life and processing. So the artwork always does that. And then walking in the woods and shooting, that is so healing, because one, I'm actually out in the woods, and then I'm making pictures and creating. So all those things help me to feel better and to think about myself in a different way. Does that make sense?
We also had an earlier question in the chat, Sue, about the photograms. I believe it was about the size.
Okay.
It was just, yeah, how big were those printed?
The leaves, are you talking about the leaves? They're all on a 20 by 24 paper. And so, and the leaves, there were some years where the leaves were larger than 20 by 24, so the edges were off the paper, but it all depends on the weather, how hot it is, you know, so sometimes they're smaller, but that I stuck with the standard size. And even when I did the color scans, I printed them 20 by 24 too.
Great. Would anyone else like to jump in with a question for Sue?
Come on, somebody. Somebody.
I see Lindsay French. Hey.
Hi. Sue.
Hi.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Thank you so much for your talk, Sue. It was so awesome to learn more about your work and some of the inspiration behind it. I was kind of curious. I was really struck by the cicada pieces, especially where you started bringing in those browns, where they were kind of almost starting to get like a little bit unsettling. And so much of your work is like so beautiful. And I guess I was just curious about like how you think about the like beauty and the beautiful in your work.
Well, I'm really a fan of the beauty in the work, and I just I don't have any problem with work being beautiful. I feel like a lot of what I am looking at and a lot of what I'm photographing I find to be beautiful, so I want to translate that. And especially with the blueprints, the cyanotypes, I want them. I mean, I was, initially calling them a beauty, blue beauty, because I want them to be even more beautiful than they really are. So I just feel like there's plenty of room in life for more beauty, and I just like that to be a quality in my work. And a lot of my work too is small. I mean, by art standards, so I don't really go much bigger than 20 by 24 because I want them also to be sort of human scale. I really would like people to be able to live with it in their home and really just appreciate it and get some inspiration from it. So yeah, I'm good with beauty.
And Renee, I think you were going to step in with a question.
Well, hi. I was thinking about that, I guess, to go back to grief, about that whole bilateral process of walking and how whenever you're walking in the woods and making work, you're engaging both parts of your brain at the same time. And I think that really helps with the process. And I was wondering, not only for making the work, but also for processing grief and the way our brain works around grief. And I was wondering if you found that whenever you traveled, just being able to walk and explore those landscapes and how that helped you to process.
I have to be a little, one thing I didn't mention, I want to be pretty open about this, is that in the last couple years, I haven't really felt like I really need to, I feel like I've grieved. I mean, I know that I'm never over my loss, but I don't feel like I really need the work for it anymore. And one of the reasons why I wanted to I resisted doing the video in my mind, because I didn't resist doing it, was because I felt like, oh, I'm done. I don't need my work to be about this anymore. I can, deal with, cicadas and storms. But I just like the notion of talking about it, because I feel like I have a handle on it and I can express it and I can share it. But I do feel like the traveling and the walking is exceptional for any kind of life experience, because you're out of your comfort zone, which is always good. Experiencing new things, seeing new things, making pictures, it's all good, and it all made me feel so much better afterwards. I love doing that. But yeah, I really feel like whatever work I do from this point forward will be less about personal grief and more about exploring other things. Although I keep saying I'm done with the elephant ears, but I do have another idea. I have another idea for them. I'm never done. I mean, you see the woodlands I worked on, I'm never done with those. I get ideas and I just do them. So, but I feel like it's not, I want to do like an homage to Anna Atkins with some cyanotype elephant ears.
Well, and there's the speculum too. So, I mean, you still got to finish that font.
I do have to finish that font.
Could you say something maybe about what you're touching on with it in terms of you're dealing with the natural, and you're talking about how that helped you get over grief, but there's a sense of wonder in your work, and maybe a touch of spirituality.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a religious person, so I get what.
I didn't.
Well, I'm not. I don't. I'm not or an organized religion person, and so I do find that all of my spirituality comes from nature and from being out in the world, and even as a little kid. I went to this summer camp in the Adirondacks, and I just felt like a better person when I was there. Not like a better human being, but I felt better physically and emotionally. And that happens, being in the woods and being in nature. And one of the things that I find really interesting about myself is that when my brother died, I felt like I became, older. How I just matured faster. But when my husband died, I felt like I got younger because I was single and open, and I took more risks because I wasn't as afraid, because nothing could really hurt me as badly as that hurt me. So I just started doing different things, and I felt like I kept getting younger and younger. And that's where I think the wonder comes in, and where my curiosity and my willingness to take risks and to try different things. And like I said, I just feel like I'm rejuvenated when I am in the woods and when I'm out in nature. And then gardening, I have been gardening for years, and then I started to burn out, and then I did this Master Gardener program because I was feeling burned out and I needed to rejuvenate. And I learned just enough to just go crazy in the garden this year. And so I just feel better when I'm in the earth, in the dirt.
We have a lot of action in the chat, Sue. I want to give some attention to that. Lenore says that she loves your honesty and your frankness about death and being human.
Thank you.
Travis wanted you to know 33% more annual rainfall expected in Pittsburgh by 2050, so lots of falling trees coming soon.
Thanks, Travis.
We have a question from Maggie. I think Maggie's on her iPhone and maybe has some autocorrect, because this question either doesn't make sense or it's an inside joke. I'll pose it to you and you can decipher maybe. What does it feel like to combine the pasta dishes present? I think what the question was what does it feel like to combine the past with the present?
Thank you.
I guess.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually, I love the fact that I'm old enough that I have that perspective. And I was just reading about how you see the past, your memory of the past is so different when you look at the past through your present perspective. And so I really love the notion of how I remember it now, and then I have these pictures which actually are evidence of what it really was. Of course, it's just a picture. It's just a moment. But I do think that it's just really, I just think I have so much more perspective. I'm so much wiser now than I was being in the present and looking at the past. And I do. And then, of course, when I look at these pictures, let's say of my son who's 5 or something, and he's just like this cute little kid, and then I see pictures of him now, and he looks so much like his father, and he acts so much like his father, and it's like he's like a totally different person. It's just fascinating. I love that perspective. So getting older, for those of you who haven't yet, it can be good. It can be good for some things. It makes you wiser, I think.
Definitely. Does anyone else want to jump in with a live question? Then I'm going to ask, we have
How about the cyanotype one? Yeah, Dan?
Your last project, the instruments, the speculum, they're not natural shapes, which, you know, your body work is based on nature, and all of a sudden you've got these man-made instruments, rather painful instruments, I would imagine. Where did the interest come from? And then how did the idea of a font emerge?
Do you know, I wish I could remember that. I was attracted to them at the estate sale. I had to have them. I think they were just so bizarre. And they were, and then I didn't know what I was doing with them. And I was been racking my brain figuring out how I went from these abstract photograms to, and like Rorschach kind of pictures, to making a font. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I wish I could. I think I destroyed those brain cells. Sorry. It's a mystery, but, and I did it a while ago, actually. The first word I did, which was the only word for a while, was it was a 4-letter word, another one, F-U-C-K. I didn't include on this because this is a community show. But I thought that was the obvious word. My mother is here. I know she was very upset with me. Hi, Mom. She was very upset with me that I did that. But it seemed like an appropriate word for women's reproductive health. So, yeah.
It's Joe. It was after the election.
What?
The first word.
That was when that's when I made the bags. When Trump got elected is when I actually decided to like go public with it. But I had made the words way earlier. So yeah, I don't remember where that came, but yeah, definitely.
Good, great job, Suze, by the way.
Thanks. Kim has a question here to talk about.
I want to echo that question about cyanotypes. I would like to echo that question about cyanotypes.
About how the process changes image from the black and white pieces? Is that the question?
Yeah, well, sorry, Sue. My phone is so weird that I wasn't sure I could actually talk, but is it clear?
Well, I'm going to answer a question. I hope it's yours. I feel like the blue makes it fantasy, and but sort of that ecstasy kind of fantasy. Whereas black and white is lush, can be seductive and beautiful, but also can be a little heavy. And I feel like the blue makes everything dreamy and seductive and sensual, up to a higher level, more so than the black. And then because it's on, the cyanotype is on watercolor paper, although I guess the digital prints now, I do print on a matte paper, so it can be similar. It just has a richness to it. It's more, I find it to be a much more spiritual experience. I mean, I just feel it viscerally, the blue. I don't know.
So it's the color of your shirt.
I wore it intentionally.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I actually, a funny story is I was painting my basement floor and I thought, oh, I'm painting it cyanotype blue. And so I bought this gallon of paint and I started painting my basement floor, and it was horrible. It was just, it was really recycling bag blue. It wasn't really cyanotype blue. And then this summer I painted a garbage can with it. And so now I have a recycling garbage can. So yeah, I do love this blue. I'm really attached to it. I like to keep it in my life as much as possible. My awnings are turquoise. I just bought turquoise sheets. It just makes me feel better.
Good.
Thank you. I put on my turquoise necklace for you.
Thank you. I love it.
Thanks, Sue.
You're welcome.
I think we've got time for about 1 or 2 more questions, if anyone wants to jump in.
Is there anything that I have no? Well, I think I'm pretty good.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say something, if I might.
Yeah, please do.
Sue, I'm absolutely, I've seen a lot of your work. obviously, and even the new stuff. And thank you for sharing. But I had not seen what you, how far you had gotten with the garden project with Mita, and it is amazing. And I can't wait to see the video presentation from that. I highly recommend everybody, click on that link and see it. Can't wait.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, I'm very nervous about that one. I mean, I love it. And at the same time, well, of course, it's very funny to me that I'm doing video. I was at Filmmakers for 30 years and never touched a video, never had any interest in video. And now, I think Jan actually made the suggestion at one point to do this virtually. And all of a sudden I was like, yeah. And so then I thought, well, of course I'm going to collaborate with somebody who knows what they're doing. And so I, got in touch with Megan Kolek. And, but you have to, there's so many moving parts and there's sound and there's, but one of the things that I'm really happy with though, is that I tell these 5 stories, and one of them I tell live on camera. And it's actually my pregnancy story, because I was in preterm labor and it was another struggle and another, it was a happy ending, but it was difficult in there. But then the other stories I tell are really kind of stories of my brother and about him being gone for 46 years and dying at 23. I talk about getting rid of Kevin's things and how kind of difficult but kind of funny it was, how I dealt with it. Actually listening to him play music for the first time after he died and how difficult that was. So I wrote these stories, which I'm very pleased with the stories, and I like the visuals. And it's been interesting putting together live video with still images and then also letting go of control, because of course I asked Meg to do this. And so I let her, I talked to her and we did a lot of work together, but then I just gave her everything and she put it together. And then I could respond to what she did. So it's to let go of control it's hard for a photographer. We control every little thing. I mean, I know I do let things happen to chance, but then I either accept it or reject it. I mean, but yeah, so the video it's so out of my comfort zone, but so great. It's been so good for this particular period in my life where everything's so uncertain and frightening. So I just kind of turned it up an extra notch, which worked out well. I think taking chances is good. I recommend that to everybody because it feels so good when it's over. No, I'm kidding. It feels good while you're doing it too. Yeah.
Well, we're going to respect our time limit and wrap up. I do want to ask one last question, which Corinne usually hosts our Tiny Talks and started this tradition now of asking our presenting artists, how can we support you? So Sue, is there anything that this audience can do to support you?
Well, actually, I would love all of you to sign up for the video of Lungs and Leaves by me and Mita, and then give me your honest feedback afterwards, because it is such a new thing, and I'm not sure where it will go from here. And yeah, so I think that if you could just watch it and give me some feedback, that'd be kind of great.
Great. Well, we want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We have to officially thank the William T. Hillman Foundation for supporting this programming. And we encourage you to come to some of our future talks if you can. Next Friday, September 18th, we'll have Curtis Reeves, another Pittsburgh photographer, talking. I think I saw Curtis in the crowd somewhere, so hi, Curtis. And then our final speaker series talk will be with Rebecca Senth on September 23rd, and that's in collaboration with Silver Eye and Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures. Rebecca Senth just wrote a book about Ansel Adams, so she'll be discussing that. And of course, we invite you to stop down at Small Mall. Right now, our Lawrenceville store is open Friday through Sunday from 11 to 4, and our Outpost in Wilkinsburg is open Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 4. We have Sue's work. We have tons of great Pittsburgh artists' work. And right now, for the month, we're offering a special print from Matt Van Asselt, and 100% of the sales from that go to a local organization called Black Unicorn Library Project. So we encourage you to stop in. If you're not comfortable coming in person, check it out online. We've got it all there. And I think I've wrapped it up. Sue, any last words?
No, I think I scrolled through and I think we covered everything that we were supposed to cover.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue, for being so vulnerable with us.
Hey, I'm very comfortable with that, but thank you for saying that.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we really
wait till you hear what I have to say in the video. I held back, yeah.
Well, everybody give a frantic gesture to Sue. Thank you so much. Yes. Yes. Clapping.